Good afternoon, and thank you for your patience. The City Council is continuing to meet in closed session. Once that session adjourns, the mayor will reconvene the regular session. Again, thank you all for your patience. Good afternoon. The regular session will reconvene at approximately 4:50 p.m.
You know what? I would talk to Beverly and ask her, and
Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon. We are just waiting for one more council member and we will reconvene. There we go. Okay, we will now reconvene the City Council meeting, successor agency, and Housing Authority meeting of Thursday, April 28th. Are there any reports? I guess we should do roll call first.
Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Sorry, wasn't ready for that. Present.
Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Councilmember Nestande.
Here.
Councilmember Quintanilla.
Presente.
Mayor Harnick.
Here.
All councils present.
Thank you. We'll now have the Pledge of Allegiance, and that will be followed by an inspiration or invocation by Councilmember Kathleen Kelly. So please stand if you're able and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Many events, many in-person events are returning to full swing. And so many of those include gatherings on behalf of our nonprofit organizations here in the Valley. I am struck by the substantial number of our residents who give freely of their time and their resources to compassionately support and enhance the lives of others at a time when national and international news can often be so distressing. I encourage us to pause and feel gratitude for the many people in Palm Desert for whom compassion is the driving force in their lives, whether that's expressed through formal organizations or through acts of kindness among strangers. May our actions tonight support and encourage them, that Palm Desert will continue to be a place where people of all types flourish. Thank you.
Thank you. We will go to, are there any reports on action from closed session?
Direction was given, but no reportable actions were taken. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no awards, presentations, and appointments, and we'll move to city manager comments.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to ask that Thomas Sowell be elevated. He has been working on numerous community projects that I know we want to take a little bit of an opportunity to share with the public. So I see him there.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Thomas Sowell, your Public Affairs Manager. And we do have a few things still going on around the City of Palm Desert. To start off with, we have 2 more days to attend Glow in the Park at the Living Desert. They extended it through Saturday, and they do have tickets for tomorrow night and Saturday night. So if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend that you get out and take a look at that event. It's from 6:30 to 10 p.m. each of those nights. Also on Saturday up at UCR, they'll be hosting their first annual Wild Coachella Day, which is a celebration of native plants and wildlife, family-friendly event that's happening from 9 a.m. to 1 a.m., both indoors and outdoors up at the UCR campus. On May 5th, we're happy to welcome back the concerts in the park at Civic Center Park. It's Cinco de Mayo, and we will be having a Santana tribute band, Santana Ways. Those concerts are free, and we have food trucks on site. We'd like to remind everyone that alcoholic beverages and smoking are not allowed in the park, but it certainly will be a fun evening for everybody. Those concerts will be ongoing every Thursday night in May from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And please note that is a new time, 6:30 p.m. So some people are used to a little bit later time in May, but we're starting them at 6:30. May 6th and 7th, we have a free 2-day shredding event at City Hall, Friday, May 6th, Saturday, May 7th. Shredding takes place each morning from 7:30 to 11:30 a.m. or until the trucks are full. No appointments are necessary, but entrance is off of Fred Waring. Anyone else who's coming into city parking lot on those mornings, please use the San Pablo entrance, because otherwise you'll be stuck in the line for the shredding. On May 7th, Palm Desert Brew at the Zoo is back, also at the Living Desert, 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. Tickets are limited, but they're on sale now. And then May 12th, we have our second concert in the park, Flashback Heart Attack, a high energy 80s band. And that show, as I mentioned, starts at 6:30. So more information about all the fun events can be found at discoverpalmdesert.com/events. More information about city happenings can be found at cityofpalmdesert.org. And of course, information about projects that are happening around the city can be found at engagepalmdesert.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else from the city manager? No?
Not tonight.
Always lots going on in Palm Desert. Okay, we'll now go to council member reports and requests for action. Let's start with Council Member Kelly.
Nothing this evening. Thank you.
Council Member Quintanilla.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just very quickly, at the Cultural Resources Committee, we had a lovely workshop on the Overpeck House. So that was great to see some of the history of Palm Desert. And on our green front, the Coachella Valley Hydrogen Hub is continuing their information sessions, and they were talking about the new and forthgoing trend for hydrogen. So I'd love to share that information with anybody that's interested. And they even talked about the potential to do a little bit of desalination at the Salton Sea, that it can't solve everything, but it's a start. So if anybody has any of those green questions, I'd love to pass that on. And that is it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Nestandi.
Not this evening, Mayor. Thank you.
And Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Thank you, Mayor.
Nothing to report and no action requested. Just a quick reminder that in addition to all the wonderful things and goings on that Mr. Thomas Sowell reported on, we have Palm Desert Resident Day at the Palm Springs Air Museum coming up, if I'm not mistaken, on Sunday, May 15th. Free admission to all Palm Desert residents and their families. You just need to present your driver's license or some other form indicating you're a Palm Desert resident. So encourage you to attend. It's a wonderful museum. Thank you, Mayor.
Great, thank you. I just have one thing I wanted to mention was we had a press conference for the Cal State University San Bernardino Palm Desert campus, and our Assemblyman Eduardo Garcia and Chad Mays both were there, and as well as our supervisor. They spoke strongly about the need for the request that's being put into our Sacramento budget of $79 million to create a student center. And I will guarantee you this, at one time, we will be asking as many people as possible to contact their representatives in Sacramento to help us get this across the finish line. But I felt it was a very successful press conference. And then next week, we have the SCAG General Assembly. That's Thursday and Friday. And by the way, I went to McCallum Open Call, and anytime you get a chance to go to that, it is amazing. There's so much talent from across this valley. So that's it for now. Did everyone have a chance to look at the supplemental, the non-agenda public comments? You all received them. It's on the website and in your packet. So I hope you all had a chance to look at it. And this is a time also to receive any comments, public comments that if the public would like to speak on items that are not agendized, they can have up to 3 minutes. And please understand that due to the Brown Act, we cannot respond because it is not on the agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on any item not on the agenda?
And Madam Mayor, I'll provide the housekeeping remarks. For those on Zoom, if you want to participate in public comment, please click on the raise hand button on your screen or smartphone. If you're joining the meeting on your phone, please by dialing in, please hit *9 to raise your hand. And when called upon, press *6 to unmute yourself. Please keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes and begin by stating your full name for the record. And again, this is for non-agenda public items.
Thank you. The first call I have is someone with the last 4 digits of the phone number are 1888.
Hi, my name's Deanna Freeze, and I live at 72848 Bel Air Road. And I'm calling in regards to the property next to me that is been sold to a Picasso company and is selling shares within the house. So I think you guys are all aware this is going on in the Valley. And for those in this beautiful neighborhood and this residence, it's very upsetting to us. It's a glorified timeshare that's happening. And for me, I bought this home 1.5 years ago. I made it my permanent residence. I own a business on El Paseo. I'm opening another business in downtown Palm Springs. And it's just not what I wanted, leaving Laguna Beach and crowded area to come live next to basically a home shared with 8 different families. So I hope that you guys can help us with this. I know there's many in the neighborhood that are upset about this and what we can do to make this go away. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments and your time. Okay, the next person in the queue is Shannon Shea.
I'm not sure if you can hear me. It's my first time doing this. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Wonderful. My name is Shannon Shea, and I am the executive director of Elder Love USA, a nonprofit organization based here in Palm Desert. And we provide in-home caregiving services to older adults, such as bathing, cooking, cleaning, shopping, and medication management. Our main goal is to help older adults remain safe in their home. And during our years of service, we have found that older adults may also need help with some small home repairs and safety modifications. So we are excited to report that we have filed our first application for CDBG grant funding for the city of Palm Desert. Homeowner rehabilitation is one of the most common uses for CDBG funds nationwide. If approved, we will focus on safety and fall prevention measures. We will be installing smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, installing grab bars in bathrooms, and helping with small home repairs. The results will be that they will be less likely to fall or have accidents in the bathroom, which is the #1 cause of disability and death, and that their home will be in a safe state with no plumbing or electrical issues that could interrupt or erupt into a dangerous situation. In the latest data from 2019, there were 1,600 seniors living in poverty in the city of Palm Desert. Poverty being defined as an annual income of less than $13,000 for an individual and $16,000 a year for couples. All of the recipients of this grant will be low-income adults age 65 and over and are both financially and physically unable to do the repairs themselves. The goal is to ensure that we are keeping Palm Desert seniors safe in their own home with the objective that they can age in place in safety and security. Thank you so much for considering our proposal to help low-income seniors right here in Palm Desert.
Thank you so much. I know we look forward to reading your application. The next in the queue is Al Ortega. You are muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Apologies for that. Good evening, everybody. My name is Al Ortega, and I happen to be a Picasso owner and a full-time resident in Long Beach, California. First, I would like to thank you for your time and commitment to the city and the community. I happen to be neighbors in Long Beach with Beverly O'Neill, who was a 3-term elected mayor in Long Beach, 91 years old. And my other neighbor who bought a vacation home here in Long Beach and happened to also be the mayor of Downey a couple years ago, Rick Rodriguez. And we were really good friends, go on vacations together, etc. So I would like to speak about the benefits as a Picasso share owner. My wife, Emily, and my 2 children, 4 and 6 years old, we love spending time in the desert. We have been coming to the desert for the past 15 years. We all know home prices keep going up, and up, making it more difficult for families like myself to really invest and buy a second home without feeling that we are overpaying, and really the ability of maximizing our investment, since we really live in Long Beach, work the kids' schedule with schools, etc., that we cannot really be there full time at the moment. The benefits of Picasso is definitely not a timeshare. We cannot rent the homes. We are building memories for my family, and we are integrating in the community. From the first day, we went across the street when we saw some old people in the garage that looked like they were struggling, carrying grocery stores, helping them. We met other families with kids. We have invited them over to our house for dinners. We have gone to vacations with them already in the short period that we have owned a Picasso share. We're super respectful with everybody in the community. And we hope that you consider the benefits of share ownership, which is not a timeshare, and it's not a vacation, it's not a party house. There are families like mine with kids that enjoy the benefits of the share ownership and the ability to build these memories and be part of the local community. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. The next person in the queue is Mike.
Madam Mayor, do you mind if we get some direction from legal counsel about getting comments on Picasso during the non-agenda public comment section?
I appreciate that. I was kind of vacillating on that because our agenda item is about a timeshare regulation. It's not about Picasso. What's your opinion on that?
I would suggest that anyone that wants to comment on Picassos or timeshares, wait until that item is called up on the agenda.
That's
And I need to
number
recuse myself on
Okay.
once it comes up.
Thank you, Councilmember Nastandi. That is item number 17. And so to make sure that we're doing this right with Councilmember Nastandi and with everything in order, we'll wait until then to hear any further comments. And thank you for reminding me, Councilmember Nastandi. So is there anyone who wishes to speak on a non-agendized item? And okay, now I see no one in the queue. Is there anyone in any other queue that I am not aware of, City Clerk?
Madam Mayor, there's no other comments.
Okay, we will now then move to the consent calendar. Does anyone wish to pull anything from the consent calendar?
Hearing no one,
I would like to, excuse me one moment, but thank you for jumping in there. I must recuse myself on item number 4. So if we can just move the balance or register a recusal on item number 4 for Harnick.
You can just register a recusal and just move the whole thing.
which I do right now.
Perfect. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Member Nestande.
Yes.
Councilmember Quintanilla.
Aye.
Mayor Harney.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you so much. Okay, we will now move to the action calendar.
You just accidentally hit mute.
Okay, and my calendar was moving a little slow. So, or my computer, excuse me. We will now move to our ordinance amending and updating various sections of the Palm Desert Municipal Code. And hang in here with me, I'm having a little computer issue. I suppose we will hear from our city attorney, Mr. Hargreaves.
Yeah, well, you have before you our annual cleanup ordinance, which has various sections. And I think you've seen the staff report. It's all pretty straightforward. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to address them. Otherwise, I recommend approval.
Are there any questions or comments?
Move to approve.
Good comment. Is there a second?
I move to
Second.
approve.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Councilmember Nestande.
Yes.
Councilmember Quintanilla.
Aye.
Mayor Harnick. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Okay, we will now move to the resolution rescinding resolution number 2019. Is this accurate? Okay, so adopt a resolution rescinding resolution number 2019-77 and adopting a revised community event sponsorship policy. Will we be hearing from Vanessa Maker?
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Vanessa Mager and I'm with the Public Affairs Division. Before you is a request to adopt a revised community event sponsorship policy. In 2019, the City Council adopted a community event sponsorship policy that created a formalized sponsorship process, including general requirements, eligibility criteria, and an approval process. While the policy created a more transparent and consistent process, feedback over the last 3 years showed a need for more clarity in the process and the policy. With that feedback in mind, staff researched how other cities handle sponsorship requests and incorporated their best practices into the revised policy under consideration today. I'd like to quickly share a slide that'll kind of give you a brief highlight of the revisions. Noted in the staff report are a list, a more formalized list. But here on the screen, you should take a look at some of the areas of improvement that we found. Again, feedback from council as well as the community. Things like double dipping and evaluation process, policy adherence and appeals, creating fair and equitable award guidelines. Since the report was already included in the staff report, I do not want to waste any of your time, but I am here and happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding the policy in front of you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kelly.
I just had one question, and you could leave what you shared up on the screen because that might help ground my question. I was going to refer to a page in the staff report, but it's right here. Under evaluation process, you've summarized that there are two protections. That city funding would not exceed 35% of the event's total expenses, and it also would not be used to cover the listed items, including venue costs. I wonder if we need both the belt and the suspenders here. Because venue costs are one of the paramount things that sponsors are hoping to cover. I mean, that event organizers sometimes are hoping to cover with sponsorships. And so my question is, given all of your research, might the city be adequately protected with the 35% requirement if we deleted venue costs from this list?
Yes, in our research, we would agree with it, that the fact that the city would still be covered with leaving the percentage and taking out the venue costs if council so chose.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan, please.
Thank you. Real quick. So Ms. Mager, thank you for you and your team putting this together. I think it's a great step forward. I wonder, as we, for lack of a better word, start experimenting with improved guidelines, what happens when maybe a situation comes up that warrants an exception? Or let's say we find out that some of these guidelines don't quite work. What level of flexibility do we have in that regard?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan, we did include in the policy under Section 6 assessment criteria that the City Council has the right to deviate from the criteria contained in the policy when they believe it is in the city's best interest to do so. So we believe that included in the policy does give the flexibility that council may need when things like that come up.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I have a quick comment. The venue cost doesn't really bother me because there are plenty of other things that when doing events for fundraisers that the city is accepting and open to. The venue costs give us some room too and some flexibility and some guidelines. That doesn't bother me, and I would prefer to leave it in there, and as well as having the belt. So I like the belt and the suspender. I think that's, it gives us puts us in a good position to make sure that we agree with how things are being done and that we're taking advantage of the best possible ways to raise money and to help our 501c3s. Councilmember Kelly.
I want to fully hear your perspective. What are you thinking are the substantial additional costs typically involved beyond venue costs, salaries, prizes, and awards? Because that's the full list of things we're saying we don't want our support to cover. Help me out. What are all the additional things you're envisioning we would be covering?
Well, it can be the printing of an invitation. It can be the food. It can be the centerpiece. It can be the marketing collateral. It can be talent occasionally to be your MC. It can be other types of talent. It can be goodie bags. It can be all sorts of different things. And I've done a lot of events for 501c3s, so that's where I'm coming from with that.
Okay, you have proven you've planned a lot of events. That was an impressive list. So what I would urge, however, is if we have the limitation that we're not going to cover more than 35% of the total event costs, aren't we just putting them to some extra accounting requirements to figure out how to persuade us that they have allocated our contribution to one of those things you listed rather than this list of no-nos? I'm still struck that we're not really accomplishing anything substantive. We're just putting them to an extra accounting requirement.
Or extra accountability. And it's okay that a 501c3 goes through extra accountability. I don't see a problem with it because it's important that 501c3s are accountable and make sure that they are spending money appropriately. Councilmember Quintanilla.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's a lot to consider, and I agree with Councilmember Kelly that the venue is usually the most expensive part of it, depending on who the organization is. There may be organizations that have their larger title sponsors, but given the 501c3s I have worked for that don't already have that. So for example, when I was a band booster for Cathedral City High School, the money that came in was from parent volunteers and parent time, and the gifts could be covered. The centerpieces were made within the group, but always the limitation is finding a venue. And I think that that is unfair to exclude that part specifically. But I do agree, Madam Mayor, that there's nothing wrong with accountability. They are supposed to be keeping those records. And it would also show good faith that if you should want to come back another year, we want to know that things were used appropriately. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else want to comment? I have to say this, the venue, it's never that it is actually the venue, except for very few times. When they don't give you a breakout and say, here's the venue cost. What they give you is food, time, labor. It's not the venue. There are some extraordinary times, and we can think back even if we look at things like the farmers market, there was a venue issue there. And I think that's what we're trying to avoid. And I think that's okay, because we're not saying we're not going to help subsidize the food that is being served or the centerpiece. Those are where the costs in a venue are. It's not saying the venue. So I think that's an okay insert there, and I support that. Councilmember Kelly.
All right, we can always refine this based on experience. So having heard your arguments, I will move to approve it as it is for the present.
Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan, your hand is up. Can you second it for discussion or?
Yeah, I'll second it for discussion. I'm just, now maybe I'm a little confused. When we say 35% of an event's total expenses, but excluding venue costs. And so, Ms. Mager, am I understanding that correctly? I mean, if you know, an annual fundraiser, I mean, aren't the majority of expenses the venue costs, the cost of the meals, the rental of the ballroom, et cetera?
Most of the requests that we receive for community events are usually your larger festivals, runs, walks, things of that nature. And so therefore the venue costs would be renting the park, rentals. And at that rate, we have talked to our council, Bob, and he had let us know that obviously we want to treat everybody fairly. So there are no waiving of fees for any of our nonprofits that want to, because we don't want to set precedent for one, or the street, which there are no costs. The venue costs that we have received have been organizations that are having events on for-profit businesses. And the reason why the venue costs were associated in there was at a previous meeting, council had made mention that they did not support funding an event where a venue contract was not negotiated through the city. But again, we are happy to take that piece out if council at this point would like to have that removed.
Yeah, I apologize. It's probably me. I'm just not getting this. I mean, if a legitimate organization, 501c3 organization that we support is having a special event that's a fundraiser for them, if we look at their financials and all the expenses are related to putting on the event, why would we want to omit some of them? We already have a 35% cap. If their cost is $20,000, who cares if part of it is a venue rental or salaries to put on the event? I mean, if they're legitimate costs and we already have a 35% limit, and I'm not arguing with it, I'm just trying to understand where staff is coming from. Why would we want to start tinkering with what composes, the composition of those legitimate expenses? I'm just not getting that.
Okay. And the salaries, Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan, were included in there because we were following suit from outside agency. And in the outside agency process, salaries is something that the city has not approved in the past. But again, we are happy to change whatever it is that the five of you would like us to do.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Quintanilla.
Mayor, I am still advocating for removing the component about the venue cost. I understand that salaries now has been, there's precedent and advice coming in, but I think that within organizations, if people are losing time out of work in order to be present for this event, or if somebody ends up working overtime, I think that would be appropriate. But I also do have a question. I didn't quite catch the component where you said that some of this had been put in place because of use in a for-profit. So if you can clarify that, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, so we do have instances that are starting to arise now. Where we have organizations that are wanting to utilize theater spaces or other open areas on private for-profit business property. And so that's where these venue costs are starting to arise from. In prior years, the requests that we had received were traditionally for public spaces that the city owned, and so there were no venue costs associated with it, or again, the parks where the venue costs were minimal. And we've just seen a switch in the last year. I hope that answers your question. My apologies if it doesn't.
No, thank you. That's perfect. Thank you, Ms. Major.
Okay, Councilmember Nestandi.
I would just like to thank Miss Mager for a wonderful report and recommendation of staff. And I have been ready to approve this and think it's staff's recommendation should be approved.
Okay, so we have a motion and we had a reluctant second. Is it possible for us to take a roll call vote at this time?
I think so.
Okay, there you go.
Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Can we clarify, Madam Mayor, what is the exact motion? Are we moving to leave the 35 or omit the 35?
The motion was to approve as is. We can live and learn and come back and change it.
You know, this has been a process. We are learning, and if there are adjustments we need to make, we will come back and make them.
And just a final comment, I'll stand with the second, but I think staff is hearing and understanding that there may be some legitimate events where a large bulk of their expenses that we want to support, and a large bulk of the expenses involve venue costs. So I would ask staff, assuming this motion passes, to just kind of keep an eye on that. And if you feel like, we get it, maybe we need to revisit that part of the ordinance. Thank you.
So.
Okay, now really you could take a vote.
Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Councilmember Nestande.
Yes.
Councilmember Quintanilla.
I abstain. Thank you.
Mayor Harnick.
Yes.
Motion passes 4 with Councilmember Quintanilla abstaining.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move to number 11, award contract in the amount of $433,132.50 to Engineering Resources of Southern California, Inc. of Redlands, California for professional engineering and design services for the Haystack Channel improvements, project number 509-22. And it looks like we have Mr. Gaylor.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. This item is for the design and engineering services related to the improvements to the Haystack Channel. Channel will be studied to ensure that it's sized appropriately, that it's safe and functional. The city received 3 proposals from consultants, and Engineering Resources of Southern California was ranked the highest, so we recommend approval.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, we have one from Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Thank you. Just a quick question. This was an RFP process?
That's correct.
Okay, and normally, so it's not an RFQ. Normally we get a listing of the range of bids. I didn't see that in the staff report. Do you have that information at your disposal?
I do. The cost proposals that were provided, Engineering Resources provided the lowest cost amount at $386,000. We negotiated with them to provide some support for grant writing, and that increased the value. The other proposals came in at $400,000 and $470,000.
So did we end up taking the lowest one with the additions then?
That's correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other comments or questions? I do see someone from the public that put their hand down, so no longer wants to comment. So I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Councilmember Nestande.
Yes.
Councilmember Quintanilla.
Aye.
Mayor Harnick.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you so much. Okay, we will now move to item number 12, approve amendment number 1, contract number C38851 to contract number C38850 for arboricultural services with West Coast Arborists, Inc. of Grand Terrace, California, in an annual amount not to exceed $975,000, project number 933-23, and approval of change order number 1 to C38850 for additional services during fiscal year 21-22 in the amount of $100,000. And it looks like, do we have Mr. Chavez?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Randy Chavez, a Community Services Manager. The staff report you have before you, staff recommends approval of amendment number 1, approving the remaining 2 one-year extensions with West Coast Arborists. In addition, staff also negotiated a 4.5% CPI increase with West Coast for the remaining 2 years. And as mentioned in the staff report, staff is requesting approval of change order number 1 due to additional work that was performed during this fiscal year. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions or comments? Good job, Randy. Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Councilmember Nestande.
Yes.
Councilmember Quintanilla.
Aye.
Mayor Harnick.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you so much. Our next item is 13, appropriate additional funds in the amount of $340,000 for construction contingency and approve amendment number 2 to contract number C37040B with South Star Engineering of Riverside, California, in an amount not to exceed $300,000 for additional construction management and inspection services related to President's Plaza East and West parking lots improvements. And who will be giving us the staff report?
Audrey will be giving the summary of the staff report today.
Thank you so much.
Good evening. I have a couple of slides for y'all. Let me get them shared. Okay, today we are requesting additional contingency budget for construction of the President's Plaza parking lot and also additional construction or budget for additional construction management services for South Star Engineering. I just wanted to walk through our justification for the fund request. So our requested budget would fund the following items. We would add construction contingency budget for additional construction work that's been identified by the project team, which I'll identify on the next slide. Payment of the incentive clause to the contractor for early completion of their interim milestone. That was getting both lots paved and open in March. And also any additional unanticipated work through the completion of construction. We're also requesting additional construction management and inspection services due to the extended project construction schedule. We still need the construction manager and daily inspection on site through the end of construction. This is just a figure that shows the additional construction items that we've identified. The big red square is the 2-phase paving for the west lot. We did that to pave the lot or expedite paving while CVWD was still completing their underground utilities. Since that time, we've completed slot paving to fill in the trenches, and we are ready for the second layer of phasing on both lots. The water symbols, that's a rework from the contractor due to the installation of CVWD infrastructure that was not consistent with our plans. They had to go in and tie in the infrastructure they'd already installed to what CVWD ended up putting in. The little light bulbs you see across the lot, that's continued use of temporary lighting for safety purposes until we can get the new light poles energized, and SCE's working on completing that in the next couple of weeks. I've also got some little orange lines on the north and south side of the west lot. That was additional mobilization and paving or concrete installation on the sidewalks where we had to wait and fill in some segments once CBWD completed their work. If you see the little ADA symbols, those are additional ADA ramps. We added those based on requests from several businesses. We had designed it to have banks, so everyone didn't necessarily have an ADA space in front of their building, but we added some ramps so that people could easily access the sidewalk in more locations. And then we had a couple more septic systems in the west lot once we went into paving there. And we have had to relocate some additional SCE pedestals that were not included in the original plan. So this is the extra work that we've been able to identify. And that's included as, or would be funded as part of this, the additional contingency budget. I did want to give y'all an update on the schedule. As of now, the interim completion was March 18th. They actually finished on March 10th. That's why we have the additional, or we have the incentive for the contractor. And the current completion date is May 18th. But due to issues with fabrication and installation of the carports, that's going to be delayed. So right now, the contractor is pushing to get the lots paved, all finishing work done, except for the carports by the end of May. And they anticipate completion of the carports by late summer. Right now, we are coordinating with them to try to determine and refine that completion schedule and determine additional days associated with critical supply shortage associated with steel. So that is my little summary. I'd love to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there questions or comments? Well, I see none, so I'll entertain a motion.
I motion to approve.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Councilmember Nestandi.
Yes.
Councilmember Quintanilla.
Aye.
Mayor Harnick.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you so much. Okay, we'll now move to 14, request for feedback and direction to the development of a facilities and park use policy and amendments to Title 11 Parks at the Palm Desert Municipal Code. And do we have Mr. Firestein to provide us with a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Over the last 2 months, staff has received questions over the city's policy and eligible use of the amphitheater. 2 events in particular have led staff to review the existing regulations contained in the Palm Desert Municipal Code, together with the existing procedures to review and issue a park use permit. Staff is initiating an amendment to the Palm Desert Municipal Code to recognize changes in the management of the city's parks and recreation facilities since the regulations were adopted, and also to conduct a minor cleanup of the administration, coordination, and review of park use permits. Staff is evaluating whether a fee resolution needs to be presented to council to recognize current fees and charges and to establish a process to update those in the future. An administrative policy is also being written to document the relationship between the city, the Desert Recreation District, and the Family YMCA of the Desert with respect to the administration of the permitting process for group gatherings, park reservations, and park use permits, as well as the reservation of the Civic Center Park Amphitheater. This will also address the use of the council chambers by outside organizations once our construction project in there is complete. The subject of the staff report in my presentation this afternoon are 2 particular areas where staff is looking for feedback and direction from the City Council that will influence the code amendment. Those are the use of the Civic Center Park Amphitheater and also fee waivers for park use permits. I'll take these issues one at a time. With respect to the use of the Civic Center Park Amphitheater, currently the Palm Desert Municipal Code requires a park use permit to reserve the amphitheater, and fees are required to cover the cost of any event. Your staff report this afternoon addresses this in more particular detail, but the Palm Desert Municipal Code contains specific standards for the issuance of a permit. The Desert Recreation District works with prospective applicants to explain the criteria, and there are no instances in their recollection where a permit has been denied based on the inability of an applicant to meet the criteria that are in the code. As I mentioned, there was an event earlier this year that led us to evaluate our code and regulations. That was the Coachella Valley Freedom Fest. They conducted an event on March 22nd at the Civic Center Park Amphitheater, which drew some questions on whether the event was permitted, and there was some concern that the event may be seen as a city-supported event. This event was in fact permitted. They met all the city and Desert Recreational District requirements, including the payment of all fees and demonstration of insurance requirements. They have since submitted a permit application for another event, which the Desert Recreation District will also issue, provided that they pay their fees and that they continue to submit the required certificates of insurance. The potential restriction of the use of the amphitheater, it intersects with constitutional protections of free speech guaranteed under the First Amendment. Generally, the city may exercise content-neutral time, place, and manner restrictions, such as requiring permits for events over a certain size, the use of amplified sound, hour limitations, even a street closure, such as what our code currently requires today. Any content-based restrictions must survive strict scrutiny, meaning they must be narrowly tailored to further a compelling government interest. Your staff report this afternoon provides a further account of these issues, and the city attorney is available to answer any specific questions that the council may have. Staff is not recommending any changes to the current standards to be granted a park use permit, and advises against restrictions on the use of the amphitheater. The second issue for discussion this afternoon is the waiver of city fees for a park use permit. Currently, the code requires a park use permit for the reservation of the amphitheater, and again, fees are required to cover the costs. City Council adopted a sports facilities use policy in 2015 that established a permanent fee waiver for nonprofit Palm Desert-based youth sports organizations, more specifically those recreational youth sports organizations recognized by the Desert Recreational District, and only for regular season practice and league play. This policy has been interpreted to grant fee waivers for permits issued to the city, the Desert Recreational District, and the Family YMCA of the Desert. There is no basis for the waiver of park use permits outside of this policy currently in the municipal code. Staff has found that staff has granted fee waivers informally more than 15 years ago for several recurring events that are described in your staff report. The second instance that we had this year that led us to review our code, policies, and procedures, there was an event where the organizer paid their permit fees, but made an appeal to the city manager on the basis that he historically has not paid for fees for events held in the amphitheater. While those fees were reimbursed, it raises the question of when fee waivers should be granted. If council has an interest in doing so, staff recommends that the Palm Desert Municipal Code be amended to grant the authority to the city manager, and that the council provides some parameters for the city manager to process any waiver requests. Staff's recommendation on this point this afternoon is that any fee waivers be limited to nonprofit organizations benefiting the Palm Desert community, no more than one event per year per nonprofit, and that the waiver only apply to the city's portion of the fee covering the facility rental and excluding any deposits or hourly rates for staff support. With that, we'll close out staff's presentation and listen to any questions and dialogue from the council.
Thank you so much. I'd like to hear questions and comments, and I see Kathleen Kelly's hand is up.
I'll start with a question, which will probably go to the city attorney. I want to make sure that I understand one part of the written staff report correctly, which would then give rise to a question. And what I glean from the written report is that it would be possible to treat the amphitheater in the same way that we treat meeting space. It's not 100% obvious that it's a meeting space akin to, say, council chambers, but arguably it could be treated like a city-owned meeting space, which, if I'm reading this correctly, would mean that within First Amendment law, it would be permissible to preclude events at that site for partisan political purposes. So my first question to the city attorney is, do I have that right? And the second question is there any body of law or precedent from other cities that helps establish what constitutes partisan political speech? And once we have the answers, then I can say why I'm asking.
Well, I think the answers are yes and yes. Yes, we could treat the amphitheater as something. I mean, an open public forum is a space that people just generally gather and do whatever they do, and parks are kind of that. But the amphitheater is a special thing, just like our meeting spaces are. It kind of depends on how we've treated it in the past, but I know we kind of regulate that space. So I think we could treat it as what we call a limited public forum. The second issue had to do about kind of separating out partisan political speech. Yes, but it's very difficult defining what's partisan political and what's not. And there is a large body of law that kind of evolves over time. I mean, we get a Supreme Court decision maybe once a term on the parameters of the First Amendment. I think we've got one up there now about a coach praying on the 50-yard line, right? So trying to figure out what's political, what's religious, what's not is an incredibly difficult area. And so, you know, we got to come up with regulations that meet current muster, and we can do that, and people have them. And then the real challenge is implementing them, because, you know, anything can be political, right? Or be construed to be political or not, depending on the context and what's going on out in the community. So number one, it's a very difficult area to regulate in. Number two is in Palm Desert, we've generally taken a very expansive kind of view of what's protected by the First Amendment. And we really, at least in my opinion, haven't had, you know, real problems with it. I mean, what we do is we protect people, we protect property, and then we try to give people an opportunity to vent, right? So yeah, there's a certain amount of flexibility. There's a whole lot of ambiguity, and it's just, you know, it's almost ad hoc, but we can get guidance, and we can do it, and we have done it, I think, rather successfully, actually.
So I'll briefly explain why I asked, since you're called for questions and comments. When people exercise their First Amendment rights someplace in the park, I've never heard anyone perceive that those exercising their First Amendment rights spoke for the city or represented the city or were sanctioned by the city. I think back to Occupy Wall Street. Their presence didn't cause anybody to conclude that the city was supporting Occupy Wall Street. But when something happened in the amphitheater, it did cause some folks to perceive that it was city-sponsored or city-supported, which tells me that the public perceives the status of the amphitheater differently, perhaps because they are typically at the amphitheater for city-sponsored events. So when we get to fuller discussion, I would like to hear whether colleagues feel we should at least explore rules that treat the amphitheater differently to avoid erroneous public perception.
Councilmember Nastandi.
Thank you, Mayor. And I was ready to comment already, and stop me if you want to save this for later, but I fully support the First Amendment rights and the rights of people to exercise their First Amendment and free speech. I believe it's the foundation of democracy. And all too often in society now, we are seeing big tech companies deciding which political speech is proper, which is not. Even COVID has gotten brought into the conversation. What can be spoken about COVID, what can't, what statistics can. I could go on, and I surely want to continue the Palm Desert policy of supporting First Amendment rights and do not want to change things and single out the amphitheater. Just because people's perceptions are incorrect doesn't mean, in my opinion, we base policy on it. And I also support giving the city manager discretion for fees for nonprofits. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'll have some comments later on, but right now I just have a quick question. What is the fee for the use of the amphitheater?
It varies based on the event. Generally, these are a few $100s, but some events that we've had have spanned multiple days, many hours. So you have a reservation fee for the amphitheater itself, and then there's an hourly fee for support staff for that event. A small event may have 1 or 2 support staff that are billed at a rate of $40 an hour. Large events, you might have 8, even 10 staff that are billed to that event at $40 an hour.
In addition to the rental fee?
That's correct, yes.
And is the rental fee designed to recoup direct and indirect administrative costs associated with the rental of the amphitheater?
The costs altogether are meant to recover the costs for supporting an event, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Quintanilla.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My thoughts on this are that free speech needs to be protected, no matter whether you believe in one party or the other, whether you believe the earth is flat, whether you believe the sky is green. We need to preserve people's opportunity to have their beliefs and respected. I can tell you that being at that amphitheater means a lot to people in ways that you may not know in this moment. My first public speaking to a very big crowd was at that amphitheater, and the ability to bring people in an outdoor space. So especially in the time of any health concerns, you know, instead of getting indoor rental space, this becomes a very community building event. As we talk about bringing everyone together, Unite Palm Desert, the opportunities, I think, outweigh challenges. I've also asked staff before and asked what kind of events had been cut off or where there had been incidents. I think that one was mentioned where it was a music festival and somebody was saying some profanity and it was just not appropriate for families and people started complaining. But I think that if there has not had been a historic issue of this being problematic, I agree with staff that we should leave it be, and that also Mr. Heilman is a perfectly competent individual to give the green light. Thank you.
Thank you. We've all had a chance to make a comment, and I see somebody from the public who has their hand up, and I think it would be a good idea to allow that person to speak. So, Mr. Schwab, would you like to offer your comments? And your limit is 3 minutes, please.
Can you hear me now? Sorry, I was on mute.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak. I would like to mention a thing that has been bothering me in the past, and we all know that we live in times that are political and we're divisive, and there's a lot of things going on. There are a lot of things going on that I don't want to mention specifically because I try to be nonpartisan. However, if something is going on in a public space, there should be provisions in place to prevent profanity, foul language, some sort of aggression, either in printing or with banners or with loudspeakers, because I do see a decline in those events where just aggression is either written, or there's profanity, or there's use of the F word in either direction of the political spectrum. And I think we should stand up and say, this is not what Palm Desert is for. We are trying to include everybody. We are trying to be nonpartisan, and clearly sometimes that is going out of hand, especially during the pandemic or during the last, let's say, 4 years. And I really would love to see everybody at the city of Palm Desert to step up and draw a line in the sand. And I support the First Amendment, clearly. That is not a question. But there's also ethics in place, and we all have been raised properly by our parents. And there should not be that much aggression or profanity, or even words that I don't want to repeat. They're in any form of writing or via speaker. And I think we should not ignore that. We should make sure that that is going less than more. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today and taking the time to address the council. Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Thank you. I was holding my comments. I'll present it now. I think I concur with the consensus that I'm hearing, which is we want to protect free speech. To start defining what speech is allowed and what isn't is a very slippery slope, and I wouldn't want to go there. I am, with respect, not aware of any perception that an event taking place at the amphitheater or any part of the park represents the city's perspective. I think when there's a group there that portraying a position, I think the public is pretty accustomed to understanding that they're just using a public facility, and I wouldn't want to deny them that opportunity. With regards to the fees, I don't know that I want to place our city manager in a position of, having to, playing a judge and making decisions about which groups are entitled to a fee waiver and aren't, and which ones aren't. It seems to me that it's enough of a de minimis amount that we shouldn't place the city manager in that position. So I would not provide for an exception process, and I think 501c3s all have to do their share of fundraising in order to put on events they want to put on. Thank you.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes, so I hear all of my colleagues loud and clear about the amphitheater. We won't talk about that anymore. On the fee waiver issue, what I would urge Mayor Pro Tem is that we have a pattern in practice, which is going to cause some folks who have received past waivers to expect their continuation. And it's a positive step to adopt these suggested criteria so that that happens within a framework. This recommendation is coming from staff, so it seems they think they can handle it. So as with one of the prior topics, I would suggest let's go with what staff is suggesting, live and learn. And if it becomes unwieldy, they can come back and tell us they don't want to do that anymore.
Agreed.
Are there any other comments or questions?
I move to
have a
approve.
couple I would like to make. If you all had a chance to read the 5 standards for the issuance park use permit, they're excellent. And we've done a good job with it. And it should protect. It talks about the gathering will not substantially interrupt or prevent the safe and orderly use of the public park by people who want to be there other than the group gathering. There are things that cover this all. I absolutely support the First Amendment And I wouldn't want to stop anybody from being able to say what they want. We would hope they can do it civilly. We could hope they could do it in a way it will not offend families or people with their young children. It doesn't always happen that way, but we have to be careful we don't get on that slippery slope where we start taking people's or think we can take people's rights away from them. I support the First Amendment. I support us allowing people who fit those 5 standards to be there. And I unfortunately did hear from people who believed that the gathering that was there did believe that Palm Desert sanctioned it. So I don't know how we change public perception. It's through education. We would hope they would understand that this was somebody using the amphitheater. We can't go out and unfortunately make sure that everybody knows, but we certainly can speak ourselves when we have the opportunity to express that anybody who is civil and come and has a good reason to be there and can comply with the 5 standards, they are welcome to use the amphitheater. And I also agree, I think having the city manager take a look at this is a great idea. And again, if it becomes too overwhelming, we can come back and take a look and go from there. And it looks like Councilmember Quintanilla has more to say.
Yes, I have a question. You spurned a thought that I think would be a middle ground. Would it be possible to have in their request an opportunity to see their flyer and have their flyer say not sponsored by the City of Palm Desert through marketing and education? That would be one opportunity to remove that idea. I'm not sure if my colleagues or staff would be in favor.
I think that's a great idea. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Just a question, Councilmember Quintanilla, are you suggesting that as part of the permitting process that we require for any and all events that they have like a disclaimer kind of thing? The city is not sponsored or supported, whatever, by the City of Palm Desert. Just make that a requirement for all such events?
Well, keep in mind, some we do sponsor, so we have to.
Exactly. And for those, they usually have the seal and happily says sponsored by the City of Palm Desert. So I think a disclaimer would have that. I'm not sure if the current process requires any of their marketing or flyers to be presented, but I'm not sure that wouldn't be a bad idea to have a sentiment of what event is going on and to be sure it's properly staffed, independent of what their application may say. Just be sure that things are matching.
Okay, now I see Mr. Firestein's hand is up, and I think possibly Mr. Hargreaves has some input for us.
I might let Mr. Hargraves go before me. I was going to offer a suggestion that we look at putting a disclosure on the application form itself. I'm not sure that we want to put the Desert Recreational District or city staff in a position to review all the marketing materials for every event that goes on in the amphitheater. That is a substantial burden, as well as what if something is missed. But I think that we could look at adding a disclosure on the application form that the use of the amphitheater or pavilion or city facility is not an endorsement or support of an event necessarily.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it might be difficult and problematic to require folks to put anything on their materials. You know, I mean, if we're supporting them in some way, then we have some leverage. But if somebody comes in and wants to distribute political material, we can't really require that they make disclosures. I mean, we could put a disclosure on the amphitheater, you know, to say, you know, just have a sign up there.
I like the idea of the disclosure on the application. So Mr. Firestein, if you can add that, then would someone like to, if there is no further discussion, can we have a motion and a second?
I motion to approve as amended under section 2, adding a disclosure form on disclosure statement on the application.
I will second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Councilmember Nestandi.
Yes.
Councilmember Quintanilla.
Aye.
Mayor Harnick.
Yes, and I see
Passes 5-0.
That was feedback and direction, so we turned it into a motion. Thank you. We'll go to number 15. Oops, sorry. And that is request for feedback and direction on changes to the local meeting and local event reimbursement policy. And I believe Ms. Horning will be presenting today.
Yes, good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of City Council. I'm Heather Horning, the assistant to the city manager, and I have a presentation tonight for you on some changes that staff's recommending to the local meetings and event attendance policy. Let me grab my presentation for you. Okay, so staff has been, as you've gathered tonight, reviewing some policies and procedures, and we looked at the local meetings and local event attendance policy. Background of this policy is AB 1234 contains some requirements for local agencies' practices relating to reimbursing for the attendance at local meetings and events. In 2009, the city approved a policy to address this. And now we are talking about making some improvements or recommended changes to this policy. The first of which, one of the issues that staff has identified with the current policy is the lack of definition of what a local meeting and a local event is. One of the policies relating to non-local meetings and events has a definition, so staff would like to incorporate that into this policy so they match. And that's essentially making it traveling within a 75-mile radius of City Hall and does not require an overnight stay. The second issue that staff would like to address with this policy is local meetings and events are grouped together. This has become problematic because local meetings and local events are budgeted and usually handled differently procedurally. So it's caused a little bit of confusion. So we'd essentially like to separate the two and have local meetings described as, local meetings like with the Coachella Valley Association of Governments, Palm Desert Chamber of Commerce, things like that. And then the local events to include local events hosted by nonprofits in the community. And we have a couple examples there. The third issue staff has identified is the process for event attendance. Cancellations is not addressed. This is maybe a minor thing, but it's nice for staff to know exactly how we should handle this. I would like to point out that in my recommendation in the staff report, I had an error. And if an official is not able to attend an event, we'd like to recommend that at the discretion of city manager or mayor, an official or an appropriate staff member be put in as a replacement. Let's see. Okay, so the fourth item that we have identified is requests for the purchase of table sponsorships are not addressed in the policy. We get a lot of table sponsorship requests, so we would love to be able to have some formal guidelines for how the city should handle those with the city council. So we're recommending that we add a section in the policy that addresses that tickets that are available by city table sponsorships will be distributed in accordance with the city's distribution policy. A copy of that policy was included with the staff report. And then we also are recommending that city council approve a list of table sponsorships with the budget. We have a lot of events that we sponsor tables at every single year. So essentially we would line item approve those in the budget and have a miscellaneous budget for sponsorships that come up throughout the year. Then if there's new requests that come up, that council members could send the request to the city manager to be reviewed by the mayor and mayor pro tem and approved by the city manager. Also, we'd recommend establishing procedures for the distribution of the information about table sponsorship requests and new tracking and reporting standards for table sponsored events. The fifth item that staff would like to address it potentially is procedures for the purchase of local event tickets for city council. We don't really have any guidelines or procedures for these right now. So staff would like to propose considering adding a section in the policy to address that. The recommendation or the proposal in the staff report considers allocating funds to each council member to use at their discretion to purchase these individual tickets. And this, the amount would be approved in the annual budget process. and then establish procedures for how to handle this process. So at this point, I would love to open it up for any feedback and direction on staff's recommendations.
Okay, I see.
Whoops, you muted out, Mayor, but I assume you're calling me because it's the only hand I see. I just have okay. I just have a quick question. Ms. Horning, that last part is the part that I was a little confused about in reading your report. The individual council member budgetary allocation, is that, are you just kind of throwing it out there for consideration? Because I don't think you're making a specific staff recommendation. And B, how would that integrate with the earlier part of staff recommendation, which is here are the events we're going to sponsor and tickets we're going to buy anyway. So, you know, our current practice is there are certain events that the city supports and us council members are told, oh, there's tickets available for so-and-so, you want to go. Will that still take place? And then in addition to that, there'll be a separate budget. So how did, number one, is this just for consideration? And number two, how did the two integrate?
Yeah, I knew this is a new concept. It's for consideration tonight. I did pull it from another city. I looked at what other cities did and I kind of liked it. So I thought I'd throw something out there for you guys to consider and provide feedback tonight. And regarding the table sponsored events, so if each year with the budget, you'd approve a list of table sponsorships you'd like to approve, and those will be distributed per the distribution policy. So kind of the same way they are now, where you're emailed, you guys say if you want to attend or not, we sign you up. The individual budgetary allocation is purely for individual ticket requests from council members throughout the year, not the table sponsored events that have already been approved or table sponsored requests.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly, please.
Yes, two things. If I understood correctly, and we may want to bring Ms. Maker back, the policy we earlier adopted did not apply to table sponsorships. It applied to events like 5K runs, the Wildflower Festival, a different category of events. So this is where staff is offering us something definitive in regard to the galas, the other events for which we may purchase tables or tickets. My feedback is fantastic work. Staff has really been busy. And I see a lot here which memorializes current practice, which has been worked out over time in a constructive way, because it gives it some definition and predictability. We never have had the individual allocations council member by council member, but it probably is something we should consider so that one or two people don't deplete a full budget line. The one piece of feedback I would give is I'm seeing many of the nonprofits we support with our table sponsorships reimagining the nature of their annual fundraisers. So in the first year, when we strive to have a list of things we've supported on a recurring basis, as well as a miscellaneous pot for new things, please make that miscellaneous budget line ample enough to cover all this reimagining that some of the very valuable nonprofits in our community are doing. Some of the things we have historically supported might not continue to happen on a recurring basis, but new things are happening. So as we adjust to a new policy, let's make sure that we give ourselves that flexibility.
Hey, Councilmember Nastanti.
Yeah, I appreciate staff's recommendation and trying to fine tune how the city spends its money wisely, and it is the taxpayers' dollars. So I can appreciate all this. I do recall though, and it seemed to be working well, that it used to be the mayor's prerogative to meet with the city manager on a regular basis and say yes or no to events, and it seemed to work fairly well. And Todd, do you see that is that why you're bringing this forward? Because you want it to be all 5 of us discussing every event that comes our way? Because that could be, am I understanding this?
I think there's 2 things. I do have the opportunity to still meet with the mayor pro tem on a weekly basis. So if there's items like that come up, we're able to work through those pretty quickly. I think it's more of, communicating to the public, to organizations, and to the council members. This is sort of how we're moving forward. Everybody's getting one explanation. This ties in a little bit to Vanessa's presentation with the double dipping and that sort of thing. It's just making sure that our rules are really out there for everybody to see, that we're being as transparent as possible. That's really the goal. And to formalize, I think as Councilmember Kelly stated, policies that are already working well, and then just adding, if there's any concern about something that we didn't foresee, we've got the ability to work it through. I've got the ability to work it through with the mayor and mayor pro tem. So it's just formalizing that process so you all know the rules and the public knows the rules.
Very good.
Did it again. Are there any other questions or comments? I just have one quick question. And on your last bullet, and it's actually page 5 of 5, so it's at the top of the page, it says it will be reported to the city council. Do we have an idea? Is that a monthly? Is that quarterly?
Yeah, so we were thinking about reporting that regularly in the weekly administrative report that goes to council. So the exact details, it will probably be included at least once a month, or maybe there'll just be a regular link. You can refer to it on a regular basis.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Horning, I think you were looking for feedback and direction. And, I hopefully you've gotten quite a bit of that. I think personally, I like all of the recommendations or suggestions made in the staff report. And I think giving the individual council member budgetary allocations is worth a shot. I see some merit in it. And I think like we've been doing earlier tonight, let's maybe proceed with that. And if we feel that it needs fixing or fine tuning, then we can address that. But I think it's worth giving a shot. Thank you.
Okay, and I just have a final comment before, or maybe Councilmember Kelly has a comment. No? Okay, I just wanted to say, I think the report is great. The PowerPoint was excellent, and thank you for doing such a great job making it so easy for us. So now I'll entertain a motion, please.
Councilmember Kelly has her hand up. Thank you, Mayor.
That's what I was going to move to. Thank you. There is a draft resolution here. It sounds like council is affirming of the work staff has done. So is it timely to go ahead and move forward to approve that?
Can I just ask, I think this was noticed as just feedback and direction, so I'm not sure if we can take that kind of action.
Why don't we have staff bring it back on the consent agenda, since we've had a chance to express ourselves and there's agreement?
Great idea. It seems we're all comfortable with it. Perfect. Okay, we will now move to request for feedback and direction on the priorities for the disposition of successor agency and city properties listed on the central inventory of surplus land and land in excess of Palm Desert's foreseeable need. And it looks like we have Ms. Glickman.
Yes, good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. I am Deborah Glickman, Management Analyst in the Economic Development Department. The item you have before you is a follow-up to the central inventory item that was brought before you and approved on March 24th, 2022 at your council meeting. With today's item, what staff is requesting is direction from the City Council on which properties on the inventory the council would like to prioritize for sale. The Surplus Land Act does not require that the central inventory be prioritized, but this is a request from staff to help us determine the order in which to issue the notices of availabilities for properties. Even after the priorities have been set, the City Council retains the flexibility to change the order at any time as needed. This is really intended just to give us a running start on the first properties you're the most interested in. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question of our legal counsel.
We have Robin Harris here from legal counsel. Or I'm sorry, I don't know if we wanted the city attorney.
I was thinking the city attorney.
All right. Thank you, Robin. We'll come back to you.
On this list, and there are not addresses, so I'm going to take a stab at this. It says Mountain View and Portola. So I am assuming these are near my home. So can I participate in this?
I would suggest that you abstain from participating, at least with respect to those properties, if that's at all possible. I mean, what we can do with more time, and maybe Eric knows exactly where these properties are located and whether they're within the 500 or the 1,000. I mean, there's different radiuses out there. It's a somewhat detailed.
These are the properties that were left in a trust to the city. Is that accurate? Okay, so those I can't vote on. Is everybody else comfortable with everything on here as regarding to being able to vote? I see Alessandro Ali. I don't know if that's an issue for anybody. El Catillo site. Haystack.
Yeah, Mayor, on that one, I don't live far from Haystack, but I do live far from many parts of Haystack. So I don't know which part of Haystack we're talking about.
Could I make a suggestion about this agenda item, which may postpone recusals to a later date? I don't want to shoot from the hip when it comes to prioritizing which of these properties staff should focus upon. And the staff report doesn't really give me ways to think about which to prioritize. The presumption seems to be that we'll operate based upon what we've learned about each of these properties in past dealings. I would like to suggest that staff take this issue and come back with some recommendations rather than just opening it up for discussion. Come back with your recommended prioritization and the reasons for it, because then we have something to react to and to think about. Otherwise, we don't. Would that be workable?
That sounds acceptable to me. I see other hands up and I'd like to hear from the other council members. Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I would concur. I was going down that same direction. And hopefully in that next staff report, if we can get a better understanding, like, I don't know what it means to sell Alessandro Alley. I mean, who's going to buy an alley, right? The 170 acres. I mean, we've spent a lot of time on that. So, it's kind of in process. So I want some deeper understanding of what we're talking about. Desert Willow, we've got pads there. And again, we've looked at those pads, and I'm not sure what selling them means and what level of control over their development we retain. So I almost feel like there's a lot of questions being generated, and I don't know if a study session is going to be needed, because it looks like a pretty broad subject, but we almost need to go down one by one and get an update on what's going on with each of them. But either way, I would appreciate a postponement of this item so that we can get a better understanding as to what we're talking about. Thanks.
Councilmember Quintanilla.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I concur with my colleagues. I would like to table this for another meeting, and I would actually prefer if we could get in a list of addresses for closed session so that when we come back in, we would know which ones, or if staff wants to give us each direction and say, you cannot participate in this one, or whichever makes it clear and concise when we should exclude for complete clarity. Again, I see one on Portola. I'm not sure what the proximity is, and I would rather err on the side of caution and transparency. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly.
All right. I will move to refer this matter back to staff to provide us with recommendations and supporting analysis based upon the council's past input as to each of these addresses. I'm not going to specify a date certain because I'm not sure how much work is involved or what the urgency is from staff's perspective. So my motion is simply to refer this back to staff to bring us a recommended prioritization based upon council's past discussions of each of these properties. So a recommended prioritization with reasoning based on past discussion.
I'd like to add something in the spreadsheet. I do see addresses, but I wonder if we can have maps also in that prioritization that Councilmember Kelly spoke of. I think the maps are extremely helpful for the discussion.
I second if it is appropriate to do so.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call vote, please? Or it's more feedback, but.
Mayor Pro Tem Kelly, or I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Councilmember Nestandi?
Yes.
Councilmember Quintanilla?
Aye.
Mayor Harnick?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you so much. Okay, we now have a public hearing. And this is the consideration of approval to the City Council for zoning.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I wonder if we can consider a 5-minute comfort break.
That sounds like a fine idea. Please.
I have to, and I'm recusing myself.
Okay, thank you. And please don't hesitate to call out when you need a comfort break. I didn't realize we'd been in for 2.5 hours. So thank you for reminding, and we'll be back. Why don't we make it in 8 minutes?
Deal. Thank you.
Okay, it is 6:38. Let's get back to the people's business. And we're having, it's a public hearing, ordinance number 1378 to approve zoning ordinance amendment 22-0001 to modify Palm Desert Municipal Code Section 25.34.060 regarding timeshare projects. And it looks like we have Ms. Lula, who is our presenter.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. Today I have before you a zoning ordinance amendment for our timeshare ordinance. By way of background, back in November 2021, staff began looking at our timeshare ordinance and just began looking at it in reference to the new business model known as a Picasso that was co-ownerships targeting single-family homes. After review of the Picasso model, the city attorney determined that by definition, this business formation was a timeshare. In looking into our ordinance, a timeshare project is allowed in certain zones with a conditional use permit, but it has to meet all this criteria, which is 500 or more room resort hotel, an 18-hole golf course of not less than 6,400 yards. So by our definition, a Picasso would be prohibited today. But we also started receiving public concerns. Timeshare ownerships in single-family residential communities would change the character of the neighborhood. Residents see fractional ownership as another short-term rental without the enforcement, as well as concerns of noise and public nuisance. So we began looking further into that Picasso model and trying to really see the distinction between family and friends owning a project together or a property together and this business model. So we found that the Picasso business model sells co-ownership shares for that residential property in destination areas like Palm Desert for second home ownership. It is a newly founded real estate investment and management company. It purchases property or enters into a contract to purchase a single family home. It markets this co-ownership share in residential properties for up to 8 individuals. It forms an LLC. It has 1/8 share ownership interest. The Picasso manages the home, providing landscape, pool maintenance, furnishes the home, and pays all the expenses, then passes it back to the co-owners. And also the co-owner has certain days per year to house this property. They can allow family and friends to stay within their time allocated. The stays are reserved through a mobile application, and then the co-owner is prohibited from renting the home as a short-term rental. So the recommendation that we are presenting today is just to create more robust definitions that align with the state law for timeshare ordinances. It has enforcement criteria for citations and fines, and it also includes a noise control and public nuisance enforcement ordinance standards. And just for transparency, the Planning Commission recommended approval of this ordinance in January 18th, 2022, and this has also been presented to the Short-Term Rental Subcommittee for discussion. The City Attorney's Office spearheaded this ordinance. They are here to answer any questions as well as I am. And we have some public comments that were presented earlier in the City Council meeting that would like to get acknowledged for this item here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And I do want to remind, just as Ms. Lewis said, we did have 2 comments, one in favor and one opposed to this proposal. So are there any council member questions of staff? Okay, seeing no questions, we'll open the public hearing and we will listen, since there is no applicant, we will be listening to anyone who is in favor or opposed to this. And remember, please, that you have 3 minutes to speak. And the first in the queue is Marcus Schwab.
Hello again. Thank you for listening. I am living, can you hear me all?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, good. So I'm in the position of living right across of one of the properties in question. First of all, I want to point out that I think, and I got this from a neighbor's friend who is attorney, so I want to address that directly to our attorney. I think the issue is not whether it's a timeshare or not, because we already know that they specifically used the number 8 because time sharing by California state law would be 10 or more. I think the problem is that the conversion of a single family housing stock into a multi-family purposes. Also the company, whoever's behind there, whether it may be Picasso or any other company, continues to operate these properties for a fee. Therefore, it's by definition a commercial use, and it should not be allowed in an R1 residency neighborhood, number one. Number two, we had the gentleman further earlier on talking about that it's better for families and that we're getting outpriced and that the prices for real estate are going up. It's actually happening exactly the opposite. I'll give you an example. The house across the street got sold for $1.85 million, apparently all cash with no contingency, whatever. Then 3 days later, it's been put on the market with a share of $317,000 per share. Multiply that by 8, you end up with a property value price of $2.54 million, which is roughly $600,000 in profit. So stating that is better or for the real estate market and the prices are no longer getting up just doesn't make any sense mathematically. And third, I want to thank Rosie Lua for communicating with us in the neighborhood. I sent a video, I don't know if she got that. That company had the audacity to come in with a tour bus. And I'm not talking about a little bus with 10 people in it. It was a tour bus coming up in the street, unloading a bunch of people, showing them the house, which caused our neighbors to be observed for about 50 minutes because everyone was peeking over the fence. And that just gives you an indicator how the whole company works. This is just not 8 family knowing each other, sharing a home. This is a business that is using a legal loophole to make a lot of profit. And lastly, I only have 25 seconds left. We should, we all know that the only interest of that company is to make profit in total disregard of private ownership because they don't care, because they are not here enough. So having said that, my time is up and I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Schwab, and thank you for being so respectful of the time. The next person in the queue, I see the name Cosgrove. You have 3 minutes, please. And you are muted. Okay, Mr. or Mrs. Cosgrove, you are muted. Okay, we can come back to Cosgrove. Let's go to Ellen Kane, please. And Ms. Kane, please unmute yourself.
Good evening, Mayor Harnick and council members. Rosie did a wonderful job presenting the issues here, and after hearing Mr. Schwab talk, I don't really have a lot to say. I concur with a lot of his comments. Picasso has purchased 3 homes within a block of me. I think it could be just the beginning. And I don't care how they paint or frame these properties and the ownership. They have all the characteristics of a timeshare and they represent a business. They do not belong in residential zones such as mine. I want people that buy homes and that become neighbors. I don't want to have to wonder who's coming and going into that house. I don't want to have to look at the house when no one's there and actually police it for them. So I really encourage you to strengthen the ordinance and vote accordingly. I really appreciate the time you've taken to listen to me and others. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll give Cosgrove another chance at this. Please unmute yourself. Okay, you're still muted. You hit *6, is it, to unmute on a phone?
*9, wasn't it?
Thank you. I'm not, I don't remember. Thank you.
Actually, it is *6 to unmute, but it looks like this person's connecting via computer, not on a phone number.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but wasn't too sure. Okay, so let's go to Mike while Cosgrove figures that out.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Mike. I am a Picasso owner. I have a 20+ year history in the city of Palm Desert through ownership with family, relatives, and actually have entitled and brought several hundred units of development to your city. So certainly familiar with your city staff and very appreciative of what you do. That's one of the reasons why I strive to be an owner within your city. We have a family. I have 2 young kids. My kids are 4, 7. I have a dog. Certainly with COVID over the last few years, it's been very difficult getting out and seeing relatives and having somewhere to stay that you feel comfortable. And obviously having 2 young kids and a pet is always tough traveling. So this has been something that has been just great for us. This is not I saw in your code here in the staff report that this is not intended to regulate family and friends purchasing, which is it's bewildering to me, given the fact that that's a very similar model to what this is. We own we own the house together. Picasso's only role is as a manager. And in the past, I have owned homes with family and with friends in your city. And the toughest part of that is really just the part that Picasso provides, which is, the sort of the management side of it, right? The maintenance, the scheduling, the taxing, the capital calls, it's sort of regulating between family and friends is always very difficult. So having a third party be able to do that for us and allow us to be a part of the community in a home that is not a condo, that we have our own, pool and our own facility to be with my family and my elderly that lives in your city and be comfortable. And we're appreciative of that. We've never had anybody called to our home in any of our stays. We are great neighbors. We do not rent. We do not often have any guests. It is a perfect getaway for our family that we like to spend a lot of time spending money in your city at restaurants. And I'll only point out, given sort of my history and development, that your code under R1 for the neighbors, it should be known that you can't have long-term renters in R1, which is more than 27 days. So theoretically, you could have 12 different families in these homes, your neighboring homes, without any regulation throughout a year. We have 8. And we're appreciative of being in your community. And we think that we are good neighbors and contribute to the success of Palm Desert. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll try Cosgrove again. Please give your name and address for the record. And perhaps if you even just press down on your space bar on your computer, that will unmute you. Okay, so we're going to go now to Gabe Dima Smith, and please give your name and address for the record.
I'm just checking everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Gabe Dima Smith. I'm a public affairs manager with Picasso. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Picasso is a licensed real estate broker and property management company. We are not a timeshare or short-term rental company. Unlike a timeshare company that sells individuals the right to use a specific amount of time in a resort community, we facilitate the process for a group of individuals to purchase real estate. No different from a group of friends or family who co-own a home together and hires a management company to ease the demand of ownership. This is not new to your city. Palm Desert has 658 homes in a property-specific LLC, many of which are owned by multiple owners who invest or use the real estate together. The ordinance you have before you will treat our business like a timeshare and put many families who choose to co-own property in Palm Desert at risk of violating your laws. At Picasso, our business practice is to purchase a home 2 times greater than the local median housing price, making sure we are not competing with first-time home buyers and middle-class families. Picasso owners, many of whom are families with young children, people of color, and people who love your community. They are not disruptors. They agree to prohibit the short-term rental of their homes and have a code of conduct establishing great neighbor practices to protect the character of their communities. At its core, traditional second home ownership can be inefficient, exclusionary, and wasteful. Picasso is different. We offer a more sustainable way to own and enjoy a second home. If this co-ownership model is embraced, Palm Desert would benefit from year-round instead of seasonal economic activity and a vibrant community filled with families. Ultimately, we're here today to ask that you withdraw this ordinance. We understand there are significant concerns about housing affordability, noise, and maintaining the character of your neighborhoods. We believe we can work together to find a regulatory path to those goals, while at the same time embracing a more sustainable way to own a second home. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dima Smith. Next in the queue is, and I'll just skip over Cosgrove for a little bit until hopefully that gets worked out. Pat Smidoris, please give us your address and name for the record.
Hi there, my name is Pat Smidoris, and I'm actually up here in Sonoma, California, where we have had a Picasso across the street from us for nearly a year. So I wanted to give you a little perspective that despite what a Picasso shareholder might say to the neighbors, Picasso is no different than a short-term rental or timeshare. It's transient occupancy. In fact, for us, it's even worse because we're in an area where we fought hard for short-term rentals to have regulations, and now we have a Picasso. So it's anonymous people. They're anonymous to one another, despite what Mike said about all owning together. They are anonymous shareholders to one another and to us. So what we see is people coming in and out with suitcases like it's a hotel. And some are quiet, but some are not, and all are on vacation when they arrive, and housekeeping, pool service, pest, everything in between. So I'm part of a grassroots organization that we developed called StopPicassoNow.com. It started in Northern California, but it represents now communities everywhere that Picasso enters. So although they say they purchased turnkey luxury properties in St. Helena, they purchased 5 homes that were all flipped by one company. They were all previously $1 million homes owned by single full-time families in downtown. Homes that would have been perfect for young families, teachers, retirees. And so when the city of St. Helena questioned their business model being a timeshare, they turned around and sued them at great expense to the city that was already struggling through COVID. They sued them in federal court on 5 points. And one of those points has already been settled, and it's the SLAPP suit, which is a suit of intimidation. The judge was 100% right in calling Picasso out on intimidation. They have done it again recently when they put together a 5-day smear campaign against St. Helena City Council. So they did the 5 days prior to their vote on updating their timeshare ordinance to specifically include Picasso. They had the smear campaign that included unsolicited text messages to cell phones, outsourced phone calls on landlines, door-to-door visits, snail-mailed flyers blasting the city council for spending money on a lawsuit instead of a fire prevention. But let me remind you, the city was, all they were doing was defending themselves in a suit brought forth by Picasso. They're such litigious boys. So undoubtedly, Picasso was hoping to not only intimidate St. Helena, but other cities and counties. So good for you. We salute you that you are looking at changing this ordinance. Many cities and counties have legal teams working on this now. And if you go to stoppicasso.now.com, we actually have many of those ordinances and cease and desist letters on our website. So thank you for your time, and we appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so much. The next in the queue is Dr. Cyrus Thomasebi. Can you give your name and your address for the record?
Sure. This is Cyrus Thomasebi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I'm at 72895 Bel Air. I just want to inform you that we're close to Marcus and can attest and support his comments. I would only add that since Picasso purchased across the street, we have seen more traffic. We have seen people speeding. I'm seeing boxes left outside that house that could invite crime to our neighborhood. It is absolute chaos in that house. We don't know who comes and goes at whatever time. They're showing it, as he said, to multiple people. It's been nothing but disruptive to our neighborhood. No matter how great a picture the Picasso representatives paint, and I'm surprised they didn't give their full name and address, that is not the truth. This is a timeshare at best, with unknown people coming and going and being unruly in the neighborhood. I'm completely in support of your ordinance to restrict them and to remove them from our neighborhood. And that's all I have to say at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Our next speaker is Craig Pearson. Please give your name and address for the record. You are unmuted now. Mr. Pearson, we can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm Craig Pearson. I live on Samara Road, right below Bel Air, and a couple houses up from Alamo. And we've lived here for 30 years. There's no reason that we have to divide our community here of single family homes. I'd like to know why some of the information that Picasso turns out that says they can buy a property as an LLC, which currently allows them to disregard any zoning regulations. I think that's the key. They need to go to another part of the state. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Okay, the next in the queue, can we reset the timer? Yes, we can, is Brian Nestandi. You have 3 minutes. Please give your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. Brian Nestandi, 22 Kai Lantana, Palm Desert. I just want to touch on a few points regarding the LLC, first of all. Gabe mentioned over 500 LLCs. Many of those are commercial, but over 200 are residential LLCs. inside of that LLC, we don't know how they're operating, how many people are living there, what they're doing, so on and so forth. In Picasso's internal agreement, operating agreement, there are rules that everybody must follow. And as far as being a good neighbor, a good using the house well and so forth, they have agreements that if there's, first of all, if you think about somebody coming, if I had a Picasso house and my uncle in Minnesota wanted to come, use it or visit, or my sister in Texas, they're going to come and, barely stay up past 9 o'clock, hopefully have a good time, go hiking, whatever in a day. And that would be great. So that's most of the use of Picasso's. But if there is an unruly person or a kid of somebody or something like that, they have internal controls to say, hey, there was a complaint, neighbor complaint, noise complaint, whatever it might be. And the other owners there are encouraged not to allow that, or tell that person, hey, you can't do that. That's on us then. Now neighbors are looking bad to us, so we got to have you stop it. And there's a control mechanism. And there's one time they say, hey, and the guy said, I apologize, it won't happen again. It happens again. They say, hey, you cannot do that. We've told you twice now, one more time. And now we can restrict your use, maybe take 6 months off it, whatever it might be. Do it again, and we can have the right to remove you from this house, because most of the owners want to have good neighbors, just go out there, enjoy the weekend, whatever it might be. And so like I say, it's a built-in control, but with the other LLCs, we don't know what they're doing. So it's really a internal mechanism to control for those problems that really I don't think are going to exist. But what we put forward, and also the in the report, it says they're a timeshare, once again, because they sell time. They do not sell time. They sell shares. The people that own that, and it may not be 8 families, it may be 4 families, whatever it might be, they work amongst themselves of who's going to use it when. So they are not selling a specific time. But what we'd like to do is just continue working with staff and any council members. We got the ordinance, last week. And so we've been having that time really to go back to staff to say, hey, here's some ideas, because we want to be regulated. We want to have maybe a permit process, whatever it might be, that works with both sides and the neighbors and everybody. So we would just like the opportunity, if it could take another 2 weeks to have another go at it, have some meetings now with this ordinance, have suggestions of how it might work all the way around. That's what we're asking for. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But we don't want to see litigation on either side. We'd rather just try to come to an agreement that everybody can live with. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, we have 2 more people at this time in the queue, and I see Cosgrove is back in. So why don't we let Cosgrove give it a go? Please give your name and address for the record. You're still muted. Okay, what we'll do is we'll go to Renee Mead. Please state your name and address for the record. And you are muted. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me now?
We can now hear you.
Oh, wonderful. Hi, my name is Renee Mead. My permanent address is 6510 Stewart Avenue Southeast, and that's in Auburn, Washington. My Palm Desert address is on Skyward Way. I'm a Picasso owner, and I'm just now clicking in, and I haven't been listening to people talk. So I apologize if I'm repeating what somebody else has said, but I just wanted to take an opportunity to just share who I am, why we chose Picasso over a regular house when we were shopping, and maybe allay any concerns that people have about the type of person who purchases a shared home. So my husband and I are in our early 50s. We've been going down to Palm Desert for about 5 years now. We just love it. And we started shopping for a condo or a home about 2 years ago. And that's when we stumbled upon Picasso's shared home ownership model. We chose Picasso over just a standard home that we would own outright. It was an absolute no-brainer for us. Way better deal, much more peace of mind. And in the years since we have been Picasso homeowners, we've been down to Palm Desert way more than we normally have, and we just really enjoyed it. I got a hairdresser down there. I did all my Christmas shopping down there. We really consider ourselves members of the Palm Desert community. And, I just want to say that about 5 years ago, when we were, visiting the desert, really falling in love with it, we could have chosen from many of the communities, right? We could have looked in Palm Springs or Rancho Mirage or anywhere. We chose Palm Desert because it very much fits who we are. My favorite joke is the entire town goes to bed at 10 p.m., just like me. And so I guess I just wanted to, say this is who we are. We definitely consider ourselves members of a community. I'm actually kind of get my feelings hurt at the idea that people are afraid of us or concerned or don't want us there. We're pretty committed to our future in Palm Desert. We're getting closer to our retirement, and we're looking forward to a future maybe where we could either be snowbirds or live there full time. And I imagine that maybe some of you have started out that way as well. So we're probably just like you guys. The only way we're different is that instead of buying a home outright that sits vacant when we're not in town, we purchased this model where the home is well cared for while we're not there, which was our primary concern. We had a lot of, we're not young anymore, and we just had a lot of concerns about, upkeep and taking care of the home when we're not there. The model that Picasso offers ensures that the home is immaculate and
Thank you. The 3 minutes is up. Thank you so much for your comments. Is there anyone else who at this time would like to speak either in favor or in opposition to this? Okay. Cosgrove comes and goes, and Cosgrove is back. So let's try it again. And
Can you hear me?
Why, yes, we can. Can you give
You
your
can hear
name?
me. Thank you, Mayor, and I apologize.
Can we have your name and address for the record, please?
Oh, man, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I have a real concern about Picasso, and I want to make sure that my name is Ken Cosgrove. My wife, Kim, and I have lived in Palm Desert since the 1970s and raised 3 children and love this city. And we moved to Samir Road in 1986. And I just found out a couple of weeks ago that Picasso has a home right next door to us. I just became aware of that. In our neighborhood, they have now 3, I repeat, 3 homes. Our Samara, 1 street above us, Skyward, and 1 street above us on Bel Air. Today, there was a great article in the Desert Sun, very informative, regarding Picasso. And I quote what the Desert Sun said: Picasso's business foundation is a timeshare as defined in California Business Professional Code. It's just a glorified timeshare.
Mr. Cosgrove, your voice is going in and out. The volume's in and out. If you could make sure.
Okay, it's just a glorified timeshare.
Much better.
Okay.
Much better.
Okay. We are longtime residents, of course, of Palm Desert, and we're against this timeshare project, Picasso. It jeopardizes, I believe, our neighborhood, the sense of the neighborhood. And also to revisit the timeshare, Picasso does not have a formula that even pays transit occupancy tax. And they also have an article in the Desert Sun, and I quote, that each of the investors can opt to let someone else stay in their property during that fractional 1/8, during their designated time. So I appreciate, first of all, I apologize, Mayor, for the problem with my mute here. And I appreciate your time, but I want to go on record, my wife and I, that we're against the Picasso. Like I said, there's 3 homes in 3 blocks that they have purchased in Palm Desert and South Palm Desert. And so I'd like the council, if they can, to revisit the Picasso timeshare project. Thank you very much for your time. And again, I apologize for the delay on the mute. Thank you.
No apology needed. Thank you for giving your time today. Is there anyone else at all who would like to express favor or opposition to this matter during public comment? Okay, I see Paul Murphy. Oh, there he came and he went. Paul Murphy was there and now he's gone. And he's there and he's gone. Okay, Paul Murphy, I'm assuming. Yes, please.
I'm sorry to have a problem when it says lower, off I go. I was at a meeting with Brian Nestandi and a gentleman from Picasso last week to secure my support for Picasso. I informed them that I could not support them, and the primary reason is that I look at it as a timeshare, short-term rental, whichever way you want to look at it. One of the things that's very, very concerning to me is that the owner, one of the 8 owners, does not have to be on the property if they have friends or relatives visiting. That to me opens the door for short-term rental, Coachella Fest, whatever. It's not a healthy situation at all. They did tell me that after we discussed this for a good hour and a half, that they were going to go back to Picasso and see if they couldn't change the rules that Picasso has, whereby the owner does not have to be present when friends or relatives are using the house. I haven't heard back from them, so I don't think that probably has changed in any way, shape, or form. I know from the prior timeshare issues that we've had here and so forth, that people say they're going to control what goes on in the house. When you're 200 miles away or 100 miles away or 1,000 miles away, it doesn't work very well. And by the time you get it controlled, it's too late. This would make our neighborhood up here not very livable. And by the way, I forgot to tell you my address, which is 73064 Skyward Way, Palm Desert. And thank you for your time. And I'm sorry I had so much trouble getting the hand up and down.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Murphy. And is there anyone else at this time who would like to speak during the public hearing, either in opposition or to support this? Now I have another hand that goes up and down and up and down.
Mr. Pearson, who already spoke.
Okay. All right. Then I see no one who would like to speak in favor or opposition at this time. And so we will close the public hearing and I'll ask for council member comments. Are there any comments or discussion? And I see council member Kelly.
This is not a complicated issue for me. I want to start by featuring that our planning commission recommended these refinements to our ordinances by a 5-0 vote. We have a very competent, hardworking planning commission. They don't always agree. So I find it meaningful that they were unanimous in this instance. We all know that there is a crying need for additional basic housing at all price points. And price points are moving so quickly, one can't really make judgments about what's suitable for families or workers based on a certain number. Recognizing that, it's what's determinative for me is that our city will not be best served by any additional use or ownership model that builds in shorter duration stays. That's not what the housing stock is for. And if I'm doing the math correctly, Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan will correct me if I'm not, 8 ownership shares amounts to 6.5 weeks a year, potentially utilized at different times. That's shorter duration stays. That's part of our hospitality and tourism. We love our hospitality and tourism sector. We want it to thrive, but it can't be allowed to gobble up our housing stock. We know how attractive our housing stock is. We can see how the interest of the Picasso Company is growing by leaps and bounds in the vicinity where many of those testifying live. So for me, it's not about whether it's families, it's not about whether it's nice people. I'm sure there are many fractional ownership owners with Picasso who are terrific people. I'm willing to presume that those who established the company are terrific people. It's just not in the public good to allow a circumstance in which more of our housing stock can get utilized for what is essentially part of our hospitality and tourism sector, shorter duration stays. So I support adoption of the proposed ordinance amendments.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, clearly, I'm not as smart as Council Member Kelly, because for me, this is a very complicated issue. Let me start by saying that I am largely in agreement with the comments made by Council Member Kelly. The concerns that have been voiced by our beloved residents resonate with me 100%. Where my path with Councilmember Kelly deviates is that I'm not sure that the most effective way to address those concerns is the ordinance way. Here are some of my concerns. Number one, there seems to be this assumption by the city attorney and perhaps staff that the Picasso model is a timeshare. I'm not there yet. I think that is unknown in the legal community, and that concerns me. If you think about it, what Picasso does is what many individuals already do, and apparently many of them within the city of Palm Desert, and that is to co-own residential property by forming an LLC. And frankly, I've had some direct experience with clients and friends that have done that, so I know that people do that. The difference seems to be that Picasso basically kind of streamlines that process, and I get that. It occurs to me that the rights of Picasso owners are not any different than those of non-Picasso owners, right? They have a right to use the residential property. If anything, Picasso owners have greater restrictions and obligations placed upon them through their operating agreement. The real concern here that I think we need to focus on is those voiced by the residents. What happens if you get unruly people in these homes? What happens, if there's too many of them? What happens if they're breaking the rules and really kind of, selling or their time use and so forth? What about excessive noise and traffic? Those kinds of concerns I have as well. And I think there are other ways potentially to better mitigate against those potential adverse impacts. And I'm thinking that the permitting process is the path to do that. So that when any home that is not owned by an individual or a living trust, for example, but instead is owned by an LLC or corporation, would have to come to the city and request the permit. And part of that permitting process would address the kind of concerns that we heard from the residents. So that, and not only would they place guidelines on that particular residence, but also there would be very strict and extreme financial consequences to failure to comply with those guidelines. And a permitting process would also enable us to avoid an overconcentration of these types of homes. The other side of that coin is that the proposed revision to the ordinance, I think, is problematic and frankly flawed. For example, in the discussion part of the staff report, we hear that the city is not regulating ownership between family or friends who choose to purchase a property, form an LLC, and then manage the rental or upkeep through a management company. How's that different than what Picasso just presented? That's exactly the same model. This proposed ordinance does not differentiate between the, shall we call it, the less formal association of friends, family members, whatever, for a co-purchase of a property. And then when you get into the weeds of the actual ordinance, the definitions are bewildering. Developer means person who at any point in time owns or has an option or contract to acquire 11 or more timeshare interests. Well, that cuts out the Picasso model because, as I understand it, they limit their co-ownership to 8. So I'm not even sure that this revised ordinance addresses, as I said, the concerns that we all share. The definition of a timeshare interest is cyclical. It never really defines it. For example, a timeshare estate is the right to exclusively occupy a timeshare property for a period of time on a recurring basis pursuant to a timeshare plan. Well, what the heck is a timeshare plan? From Picasso, we heard they don't have that. They just have a co-ownership arrangement. And there are other kind of these elliptical definitions where every time we look at it like a timeshare use, it refers to timeshare, which hasn't been defined. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that the concerns of our residents absolutely resonate with me. B, I see a better way and more efficient and effective way to address those concerns, perhaps through a permitting process. And C, I think the revision to the timeshare ordinance that is before us is problematical and flawed. So my take on this is that we continue the matter, let staff address these types of concerns, particularly about the revised ordinance. Let's maybe even give staff a chance to talk with the Picasso folks, see if they have some input on this, having heard our concerns tonight. And then let's take another bite at that apple. Thank you.
Councilmember Quintanilla, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Oh, I agree with Councilmember Kelly on a whole lot of things. As I've been taking notes to address some of the concerns in addition to what we have seen via email, we had 4 comments in support of Picasso. 2 were employees, and 1 was outside of the area entirely, who was not even a resident at this time. So I noted half. So I'm already noticing that we have half-time residents being discussed in this model specifically. That's not the same as our seasonal residents who come and stay those months and then depart. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people that were calling in opposition of Picasso, 5 of the 7 being residents. And the other 2 had some extremely serious concerns, including the aggressive marketing. One of them mentioned that there was repeated phone calls and emails. I know that they contacted me on my cell phone numerous times after I said, this is my personal cell. Please do not continue to text me here. And they still did. And then I said, here's my city phone. And, I find those kinds of situations in bad taste, that they would be so aggressive in trying to wedge in right before we try to make a decision. That to me does not bode well as a good community partner. I think that the concept that they would be heavily litigious isn't shocking, but we also had litigation that was going on with I think it was VRON and short-term rentals. The city knows that it operates with the risk of being sued at any time because people have the right to do that. So I'm not too worried about that. We have seen that they've already had controversy, and I called it San Helena, but I know it's somewhere else in Long Beach, not Long Beach, Long Island, Sonoma, a lot of these different communities that have been struggling with them after saying, let's give it a shot. And would we have a more difficult time trying to address them retroactively after we've already permitted? Or is it best to get in front of it and then have staff say, you know what, we'll make these revisions? I think it's better to take staff's recommendation, and if we should so choose to revise that in the future, that is up to council. But I think for now, we should not leave that door open and say, hey, come on in, we'll figure out if you're trustworthy later. I have a lot of reservations, and as I've said many, many times before, we have excellent staff. We have an excellent team, and the staff is the lifeblood. The people are whose voices we amplify, and we make that decision, but staff does a whole lot of work in bringing carefully crafted policies and evolving on what we've done. So I don't think that we should also disrespect the work of staff for a few people coming out of the area, desiring to make a lot of change, where we've already heard they have flipped properties twice the amount. Whether you split it or not, that is impacting the value of homes in the area. Hearing that they took a bus there, who takes a bus to show a regular home? There's signs for open house, but never hop on this bus to go see. That to me is a very it's a very blatant disregard of attempting to be part of the neighborhood. And again, that's people have chosen to live in these areas. They don't want to live in HOAs. They may not want that kind of structure in their life. They've chosen to live outside of the HOAs. This city has already had so much of a discussion in regards to STRs, where they're permitted, where they're not permitted. And I think that, one, I feel this is absolutely no different than a timeshare. If you're having to bring your suitcases all the time with you and bring all of your belongings, that's not a home that you're sharing. You are coming to your timeshare. And I think that I have my full confidence in staff, and I support moving forward. Again, I think we need to close the door and then decide who we let in instead of figuring out who we've already let in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? I see none.
I presume you have some comments.
No, everything has been said. I think a fine job has been done.
And I'll raise my hand again and comment briefly before making a motion. Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan, I've listened carefully. We decided, in the context of the short-term rental controversy, that our residents should not have to deputize themselves to enforce lots of rules and regulations and wait for some city response to assure themselves of the expectations they have in their residential neighborhood. And my sentiments tonight are the same as they were then, which is why I'm not persuaded to take the path that you prefer. So I will move to approve staff's recommendations.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please. Oh, wait. Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan has his hand up.
Yeah, just for discussion. Hey, listen, again, I want to make it clear, and my vote, I can count. I've been there before. I'll probably be a minority of one, but I want to explain that vote. Again, I 100% share all of the same concerns that have been expressed by my colleagues. Where we differ is that I believe that the path we're about to take will not effectively address those concerns, because I think there's a realistic possibility that not us, but the courts will determine that this model is not a timeshare, and that therefore the proposed ordinance will not apply to this model, and we will have lost our opportunity to regulate this type of use and to address the potential adverse impacts that might result from that use. And I could be wrong, but I wanted to explain that my vote will be cast not because I don't share the concerns that we've all expressed, but because the path that we're about to take, I believe, is not the most effective way of addressing those concerns. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan.
Nay.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Councilmember Nestandi. Is recused. Councilmember Quintanilla.
Aye.
And Mayor Harney.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-1.
Thank you. And I ask the staff to explore any of the issues that Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan mentioned, please. Okay, there are no additional items. Is there any unfinished business of the council? Okay, seeing none, this meeting stands adjourned. We will meet back, I believe it's May 12th.
Good night, everyone.
Happy everyone, and happy Mother's Day out there, since we won't be back till later.
Adjourned 7:34 p.m.